Hey guys, it's start the week with a Kamigawa Neon Dynasty standard deck update, or maybe a feature or something else, whatever your preference is. And this is also you'll see is a known archetype in the format, which means it has already been existing back when the new set was introduced. And this list was based from the $600 cash GG Tour Duel number 9. This is the name of the store, the local game store, and was played by Lucas Dusek. And of course you can see that as the Blue Eye Control, the most I'm not sure if it's still the most consistent, but it probably gained maybe a lot from the update with the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. So let's check on the list. So here's a quick preview of the main deck in the sideboard. So we start with the creature choices. Single copy of Legion Angel for fetching other of its copies in the sideboard. Of course you have 3 in the sideboard. 2 copies of Limrith Desert Doom. It is basically a 5/5 flying threat in itself, as because of its ward, as long as it's untapped, and it's also a card draw in itself whenever it deals combat damage. And next up is a single copy of Hullbreaker Horror, which is already a 7 to cast can be countered effect, which in its case gets you to do some tricks whenever you cast a spell by bouncing other spells you don't control or another non-permanent to its owner's hand. The new inclusions maybe in the spells, as you will notice, are the playset of March of Otherworldly Light, which can basically exile artifact, creature, or enchantment with mana value X or less. As you pay more for X, or you get to exile a card, a white card, which makes it 2 less to cast for each card exiled, and also a good removal in itself because it is just basically a 1 to cast exile effect, more like Path to Exile or Source of Plowshares. And having 4 obs would not really hurt it build, since in the late game you can just basically pay mana for the X to get rid of a threat, not only a creature but also artifact or enchantments. So next up, 4 copies of Jewelry Disruptions, basically just a mana tide for dual purpose of having play a basic land. This given inclusion. 2 copies of Negate for non-creature spells. Let's check. Disdainful Stroke again for 4 mana value spells greater, basically countering other huge threats or planeswalkers. 3 copies of Faithful Absence as a solid spot removal for creature and planeswalker, with just a little drawback of having them investigate. Then 2 copies of Memory Deluge as a gas for the late game because of its flashback effect. By checking on the top X cards available whenever for the mana, the X mana spent for the casting the spell. So that means that the first copy is 4 cards, top 4 cards, and then the second one is the top 7 cards of the library. Then you put 2 in them in your hand, and then put the rest in the bottom in a random order. The lone copy of Starheim Unleashed, also a good source for having 4 creature threats, which may make it a variance here. And for spot removals, we have Doomscar and Farewell as another new card from Kamigawa, which can exile basically all 4 card types, and also 3 card types, but also graveyards, in the sense that it may become a threat for other control decks or mid-range. Also Emira's Call as a good creature source and a land drop in itself. 2 copies of Teferi Most Close to Sunset. This is from Adventures of the Forgotten Realms. This think that basically lesser choice of a planeswalker, but since it is the core colors of the deck, so having two will not really hurt. But looking at its ability, just going to go through adding dig through your best cards or your counter spells, then also having an effect just like in the Big Teferi back in Dominaria. And also the emblem is just a good institution whenever the game goes long to a stalemate. So the new card, the planeswalker that's added in the list is the Wandering Emperor. Because of, as what in my previous deck tech discussions, I'm sorry, the previous not arriving, but because of this variance of protecting itself, getting your combat tricks, and also a spot removal, and of course the 2/2 white samurai creature token, which can generate that at an instant speed the first time you pay this this planeswalker. Even at its current price, it is the highest value card in the set, and basing it on its demand not only in standard but also in older formats. So you'll notice another two copies of these two cards, the Mockbuster and the Restoration of Ilonggo. This is basically a card source in fixing your draws and making sure you would not miss your lands and land drops, but also in a good sense that for this card, for example, whenever you put out the last charge counter after drawing all those cards, now you will get the charge token and the 1/1 Courage Pilot, which basically can crew this vehicle into a 4/4, which is also another good threat in case that there are open turns that wherein you can attack with this dude. And also with the Restoration of Ilonggo, having to search your basic planes and also giving you a 3/4 vigilance blocker, and at the same time which can create colorless spirit creature tokens in itself, which is also a good advantage to gum up the board and also get you a good threat once you get this one to establish. So when now we look at the land choices, basically you just have the Deserted Beach, the Fixers, some pathways for blue-white, and the new cards aside from the manlands from Adventures of the Forgotten Realms. We have a lone copy of Ilonggo, City of the Empire, and Otawara, the Soaring Sky, along in giving you utility channel effects if needed in certain situations. Now we go through the sideboard. It's basically as basic, given that you already had 3 Legion Angels to be fetched by the one in the main deck. You also have 3 copies of Malevolence Hermit, which can counter non-creature spells unless you pay 3, and it's the same time it can become a 2/2 flyer with when its the storm cost is paid, wherein non-creature spells you control can be countered with its passive ability. And maybe for this matchup, it can be very useful in mirror match, and maybe in other blue-black or of mid-range and control decks. The 4 copies of Sunset Revelry, it's like a glass casket version. The resident version is from Avengers in the Forgotten Realms. If an opponent has more life than you gain 4 life. Then if your opponent controls more creatures than you get to play generate 2/1/1 white human creature tokens. Then also a bonus is if your opponent has more cards than you get to also to draw a card. So 3 effects are added in this card, but I don't think the having 4 copies in the sideboard would really help. But it's just the player's preference of having this card as a playset, maybe because to have it as more efficient as possible and drawing them as early as in your second turn or third turn if needed. So the Test of Talents, the 2 copies of it is for countering instant sorcery spells relevant maybe for discard effects, wherein you can just search its graveyard hand library for any number with the same name as that spell and exile them. So basically you can just get rid of maybe pesky discards such as Jures, so that they can just exile it and all of its copies from the deck. So that is basically solve your one problem of getting discard spells in the late game and also in the early game if ever you get to choose to play it in the first turn. So Liar is also a support creature for the sideboard, as having your spells can be countered and giving your instant sorcery cards graveyard flashback. So flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. It's basically having a few of these counter spells is also good for just 2 mana, and also for spot removals of having 2 mana open if possible, if you need to control the late game with Liar Disciple Drowned. And that's another lone copy of Hullbreaker Horror, also a threat in itself, which can do a lot of tricks, and having a second copy makes the variance of drawing it increase, and maybe on having it maybe on the 7th turn or maybe on 8th turn, and you can also dig out for a horror to break out against control mirrors or other mid-range decks. So overall, this is the update of the build for blue-white. Given that it still uses the usual creatures from the older sets, but with the new inclusion of Wandering Emperor, it's also a good decision that we would have this, as it can basically eat up a good feature in the deck with its mana cost, its efficiency to kill off the best creature of the opponent, and also generate tokens in itself. So that's a wrap up on this deck tech, or maybe a deck feature for Blue Control. And I hope you've set this one to try this one on your MTGA or MTG Online. Just basically check out this site to download the list and make some changes according to your preference. So that's a wrap again for this deck tech. Until the next standard deck tech video, and thank you for watching.